Let's get started. So first off, thank you everyone so much for attending today's webinar. My name is Ron Richardson, and I'm our Chief Revenue Officer here at OneRail. Boy, we are so excited to share with you this content today. It's an amazing twist on the evolution of last mile delivery through the lens of the milkman, right? So when I think about a milkman, I was telling Bill this, I go back to my childhood. So I'm 51 years old, and I grew up in the Dearborn, Michigan area. The houses there were all 1950-ish builds, post-World War II. And all the houses in my neighborhood had this novel thing. It's called a milk chute. And the milk chute was this passageway that was built into the house, and there was a door on each side. And if the milkman were to show up at your house, at your door, and want to deliver the milk and greet you, and you weren't home, the milk chute was the vehicle through which the milkman would deliver the milk. So he would put it in this chute. It was secure. It was kind of sort of cold. And when you got home from wherever you were, you would take the milk out of the milk chute, put it in your refrigerator, and life is good, right? So I can imagine if you're one of the younger attendees here, you probably have two pressing questions to what I just said. Number one, who the heck opens their door in this day and age, for a milkman or anybody else, right? That's probably number one, what you're thinking. Number two, who designs a house around milk delivery? Like, who builds a chute in a house, right? The reality is that's how it was done. These are the early artifacts of last mile delivery. And if you think of that milk chute, it's not too far off from what we consider a smart locker in today's vernacular and in today's world. If you fast forward the tape, so again, 51, you fast forward the tape to today, the reality is we are smartly connected to our delivery people, to our house, right? You think about having a smartphone, and if you have a LiftMaster garage door opener, you're able to provision that to, say, an Amazon driver. The Amazon driver shows up to your house. They're usually sprinting, so there's no conversation with that guy, at least the guy in my neighborhood, he's always sprinting. Securely puts the package in the garage door shuts. Very similar concept, right? And this is the evolution of last mile delivery that's happened in the market. It's really remarkable to see, and it's really provocative to think of it as having origins with the milkman. So in today's presentation, Bill, like no other presenter, has come up with this great story about looking at this evolution and really looking at it in the context of what it means for large enterprise customers these days who desperately want to serve and delight customers like the milkman did in the days of yore, right? So with that said, I'm going to turn the mic over to Bill, and he's going to start the presentation. We're going to reserve some time at the very end for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to load those up in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will certainly allocate time at the end. So with that little walk down memory lane, Bill, the mic's all yours, and we're all ears.
I appreciate it, Ron. Great to have everybody here today. We're going to start with the concept of what's old is new. And I absolutely am fascinated with how things evolve. All different types of things, whether it's sports or technology or how we live. One of the more interesting things that I ever saw was the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. And when I went there, the very first display that they had was an abacus, which was the very first calculator, right? That was the first version of the calculator. And so you have to ask yourself, well, what has the abacus become? It's become an Azure data center, right? That's the evolution of an abacus to a data center and supercomputing. And it's just amazing how that evolution has taken hold. And that's a word that Ron used, very purposefully several times in talking about delivery. So when we think about another thing, Circus Maximus, I went to Rome a few years ago, and when I was in Rome, this is something that's always fascinated me, are the chariot races. So I actually had an opportunity to walk around this track, which today is just a path. There's very little seating available. People are walking their dogs where horses and humans did battle. And that was really cool. You could almost feel it. And you have to think, well, what did that evolve into? NASCAR, right? NASCAR is like the modern day Circus Maximus, modern day chariot racing. And what's interesting about evolution, with evolution, the intended outcome many times is the same. It's just being done at a much greater scale. Maybe it's being done in a more exciting way. The process is different, but the feeling and the emotion is similar. I would imagine if you were watching the chariots race around like the movie Ben-Hur, it would be just as exciting as watching a race, where there's aggression, there's competitiveness, there's, in that case, it was a different kind of door to door, but evolution is really the focus of the conversation. So let's go all the way back to 1775. That's when the first form of real operationalized home delivery began. And it started with the Milkman. That, I was with one of our customers, and we're currently doing last mile delivery throughout North America. We do about 3 million deliveries a month right now. And we serve a lot of Fortune 500 customers. And one of our customers said, we need to deliver with lightning speed and dependability, but with the service and the touch of the Milkman. We need to provide that personalized service that the Milkman did, but in a spaceship world. And that it stuck with me that's what we're really trying to do here. So when we think about the Milkman, a lot of us, I barely remember the Milkman. I'm 25 years old, so, just kidding, not 25. But convenience was absolutely at the center of the Milkman's value proposition, the convenience of milk coming to your home. There was also the social connector concept. I remember as a kid, just like Ron did, the Milkman would come to my grandparents' house and would usually carry on a conversation with my grandfather for a few minutes. And it was almost like that was the original Facebook, right? It was the Milkman going house to house, talking about what's going downtown and next door. The dependability of the Milkman was unrivaled. Whether it was snowing, raining, didn't matter. The milk had to get delivered. They were tough, they were durable, and they got the job done. And consumers could rely on them. And then the last thing, personalized service. The Milkman didn't just deliver milk, they delivered staples. And so those staples would be bread, eggs, obviously milk. And that personalized service is something that was just unfounded. They knew that they had to bring certain things on certain days to certain houses. And that level of service is what shopper marketing is really trying to achieve today. But as all good things come to an end, the Milkman became obsolete. This is kind of what the Milkman looked like when I was little. And they became obsolete for a few different reasons. One, advancements in refrigeration. Refrigeration technology, is far advanced. And even by the 60s and 70s, there was, most homes in the world or in the United States had home appliances, had home refrigeration. Escalating transportation costs, again, go back into that 60s, 70s era. Energy was a big concern. The concept of powering all these trucks to deliver such a small amount of product didn't really make sense. And then the evolution of retail itself, it just became less convenient for the shopper, for the consumer, where it began in 1775 is the most amazing thing ever. And then all of a sudden, it really wasn't all that great anymore. So what we ended up seeing was a pivot. And that pivot was from service above selection. So I value service. I really don't care about selection as much. I need the service, to selection above service. And that's really how the evolution of retail worked. If we think about single channel, Sears was clearly the disruptor of retail when Sears was, at full scale. And in that time, it was really simple. It was kind of a one-to-one relationship. There was no e-commerce, there was no mobile. It was one-to-one. You would order from Sears and you would receive product, and they had showrooms. As we moved into multi-channel, it's really clear Amazon set the bar. They became the Sears of the 90s and 2000s, and they disrupted, and they set a bar at a level that I would say not many companies, if no companies have achieved yet. And then as we think about cross-channel, you have to start contemplating bricks and mortar retailers like Walmart, like Target, who had and have, a large national footprint of bricks and mortar stores. that had to figure out how to do e-commerce. They had to figure out how to fulfill from store. They had to connect their technology in a way that put their shopper at the center of their universe. And that's really where we are right now, is putting the shopper at the center of the universe. And we call that unified commerce. That's really the next step beyond omnichannel. And what that means is giving the shopper visibility to the product, inventory, transportation options, and costs early in the browsing experience. And Gartner has done a really good job developing the term unified commerce. It's one that we subscribe to because that's really what our solution is focused on. It's focused on orchestrating unified commerce. And we're going to talk about what that means. So when we think about that evolution of where the Milkman was, and where we are today, it's really simple. There's been a shift in thinking. There's been a shift in change in priorities from service over assortment, where I was just happy to have the Milkman come to my house, like Ron's family with the milk chute and my grandparents. They were happy to have the Milkman come because it was a level of service that they enjoyed for years, for decades. But then as retail evolved and there was way more selection with modern day supermarkets, and then of course the evolution of big box retailers, the concept of assortment above service was more important. You no longer was it efficient or did it make sense to have a Milkman come with 1 to 5 items. But today, we're in a whole different world. Consumers demand both. They demand service and assortment. They want both. And if you can't provide that, you will lose. You have to be able to provide service and assortment. That's the now economy. That's what unified commerce does. And unfortunately, that's a really complex thing to do. But what we're going to talk about is how can we make it simpler? How can we simplify a very complex problem to accelerate time to value so that you can start that journey if you haven't started it? And if you're on that journey, you can accelerate it. So I'm just recanting something we all know. The supply chain broke, in 2020. It was epic. It caused problems in every mode of transportation. And last mile was certainly not immune from that. And what ended up happening was COVID became the accelerant for omnichannel commerce and now unified commerce. If you look at the number of call outs of the word omnichannel when COVID lockdown hit, it tells the story. And that's when we saw retail roadmaps accelerate, by some accounts of 3 to 5 years. That's when we saw retailers like Tractor Supply Company reach 1 million new shoppers because they were able to connect delivery in every one of their 1,900 stores within 2 to 3 weeks. That's when we saw companies change how they do business because they had to. And it hasn't stopped. A lot of companies made decisions to be able to service their customer, but maybe not in a financially feasible way, right? The unit economics probably don't work when you're trying to make decisions so quickly. So now we're kind of in this mode where everybody's settling down and really trying to focus on what do I have to do to become a unified commerce wholesaler, retailer. It's not just for retail. Wholesalers are thinking the same way. Product manufacturers are thinking the same way. So when we think about this framework, we look across the top, and across the top, those are consumer buying touch points. It's also communication channels. That was pretty easy relative to supply chain. It's pretty easy to unify messaging, relatively speaking. What's really, really hard is to take that messaging, take those buying channels, align them on the path to purchase, align all your enterprise systems to talk in real time, and have visibility to inventory in real time, have visibility to transportation in real time, have immediate capacity on hand, have the ability to talk to the customer. Is all this stuff's happening? And even when they're in their buying experience, that's hard. That's really hard. And that's what we're focused on. And that's what a lot of our customers are focused on. Being able to stitch together the customer's intent, their path to purchase, the enterprise systems that it takes to do that, gives you the ability to have a diversity of outcomes. Those outcomes result in virtually unlimited service levels. They result in virtually unlimited fulfillment options, whether it's buy online, pick up in store, which during COVID saw a 700% increase in 1 year. Buy online, ship from store. We see retailers that are turning on e-com shipping from their stores rather than their DCs. So all this is happening. This isn't new news. But I think what is new is how do you stitch it all together? and technology has advanced. There's AI now that's being implemented, which we're going to talk about within last mile, that provides tremendous leverage and scale. There's aggregation of couriers. In our case, a network of 12 million drivers across 1,000 delivery companies that makes it so that the retailer and the wholesaler don't have to go out and procure all that capacity. It's already there. It's already connected. It's already working. So we're going to talk about what that means, but let's just kind of level set. That chart, that diagram that I just put on the screen, that's pretty complex. Most people, when they see that, say, what in the heck's going on? It's not purposefully confusing, but it is confusing if you're not a student of the space. And I've been doing this a while. I started on my omnichannel journey, I think when the word was developed, in the mid 2000s with the digital coupon space and micropayments and shopper marketing triggered off the point of sale. That's where my journey started. And it evolved now into supply chain. So unified commerce, let's just all agree, it's complex. That's why there's only a handful of companies that can actually rival Amazon at that game. The problem is data silos of data. If in this particular example, the TMS, the OMS, the WMS, these things need to talk. There's stitching that needs to be built to make them talk in order to execute with excellence. TMS solutions did a phenomenal job with freight in managing visibility to freight, obviously with the help of visibility solutions. The problem is they don't get granular enough when it comes to last mile. They're not getting granular enough to account for the tens of thousands of couriers that exist out there in North America. They're not sophisticated enough to match at a cubic inch or cubic foot logic basis a package to a certain fleet asset in real time as the shopper is ordering. That's not what those TMS solutions do. And finally, orchestration platforms, and there's a few out there, OneRail is one of them, provide the stitching between these silos, provide the execution layer that's required to execute unified commerce. Just a little bit of a view of how we think about it here at OneRail. There's really 4 component star solution: connect, execute, fulfill, and return. And when we think about connect, that's all things visibility. That's being able to take couriers, put them on a platform, have control tower visibility, customer experience, proof of delivery, and also chain of custody visibility, which is inventory visibility. Where it gets exciting, is the execute step, which is where with OneRail, we have logistics as a service, which is a completely outsourced capacity solution where we've procured the couriers, we have the drivers, we're matching them in real time, live across 350 cities, across, from 30-minute SLAs to same day to next day. And it's all happening in 200 milliseconds from the moment the order comes from our customer, hits our platform, goes out and dispatches to a courier. What's really important, though, to keep the unit economics aligned is rate shopping. You want to find the lowest cost and highest quality and dependability. And that's what these platforms do. Auto dispatch. I'm going to talk about AI. OneRail would have to have 2,500 employees dispatching deliveries to be able to power our volume. We only have 4 up to 40 people that are dispatching deliveries. That's because we've been using AI for 3 years. The platform gets smarter with every delivery. It learns which couriers do the best job in which markets. It lowers exception rates way below the 10% industry average. And it makes it easy. So one person can dispatch, on average of 3,000 deliveries a day. When we started, it was 80 deliveries a day per person. So one invoice, label printing, some of these capabilities are found in ship stations, but you really don't need a ship station if you can get all those capabilities in an orchestration platform. Smart matching, that's the ability to take an order and immediately match it to a particular fleet in a particular place for a particular SLA. Routing, in our case, we have a driver app. Where it gets exciting is fulfillment. The fulfillment part of the OneRail solution is where we start looking at inventory and triangulating it off of transportation. So we can make decisions in real time between what inventory is on hand and where, and what are the transportation options available in real time to provide on time in full, reduce split orders, lower the cost of fulfillment, and improve and increase, the on-time SLA compliance. And that inventory optimization component is absolutely monumental to being able to fulfill the lowest possible cost per SKU. And then finally, returns. Returns are one of the biggest problems that are still really left to be solved at scale anyway. And returns is something that, you kind of need some of these other components before you can be great at returns. So the reality is here, you can't solve all these problems at once. You have to work smarter, not harder. And the way to do that is to find your leverage. Finding your leverage is instrumental in solving these problems. And the leverage point, as we try to really simplify, there's three big buckets of capabilities. There's inventory visibility and optimization, there's last mile delivery orchestration, and there's customer experience. The focus, in terms of getting leverage, the fastest time to value, the biggest impact you can make is to upgrade your last mile delivery orchestration. Even if you can't start triangulating inventory and last mile off of each other in real time, which is kind of the holy grail, being able to execute last mile at scale at a 98+% on-time rate at the lowest possible cost is a great entry point. Where to take it from there is really how to triangulate these three things. Once you have last mile in place, you have your inputs, which is where is the inventory? What are the best node options to fulfill from? What SLAs are possible on the inventory and fulfillment node options? And what shipping modes would be utilized? Those inputs provide the ability to triangulate outputs. And the outputs would be where to pick from. What's the best store to be able to maximize on time in full and minimize out of stocks? More data calculations are required to be able to optimize that. So once you have last mile in place, then you can start optimizing inventory, which provides an even better upstream customer browsing experience. When they're browsing in their e-com experience, they can then start to have more options. Where is the inventory? How long will it take? And what will it cost? That's what shoppers want to know. And they want to know they're going to get their whole order. Gartner has done a great job as we focus on last mile. This is the framework of the Gartner Last Mile Delivery Market Guide, which, by the way, at the end of this webinar, you can capture the QR code and you can receive that Gartner Last Mile Delivery Market Guide. But they've done a good job. If you think about the omnichannel framework, it was pre-purchase, purchase, post-purchase, and it's very similar to this. Pre-purchase, delivery orchestration, post-purchase. And this is really the capability mix that it takes, according to Gartner, to be successful in last mile. And we totally agree with that. We took that framework and we decided, well, how do we do it? What do our customers ask us for? And the things that are in green are the additional capabilities that we're finding are very helpful to go maybe even a half a step past just last mile delivery and start edging into more of a unified commerce orchestration, because you can get more service levels. You have label printing, which is something that you typically see in an OMS. Well, it's inherent in this platform for all modes of last mile delivery. The customer experience, the customer can actually have tracking, that's branded to the shipper. So our customers have their brand on that experience. It's not the courier or carrier's brand, it's our customer's brand. So that's really helpful to them. So this framework really, I think, points out where some of the differentiation is. And as we start thinking about automation, where, if you were to upgrade your last mile solution, what would it look like? And it all starts with the data. In our case, with OneRail, we integrate to a number of different data inputs. So e-com platforms, WMS, TMS, you only need one. You don't need to integrate to all of these. Just pick a system, be able to get the order data. And then once we have that order data, we're looking at the weight, we're looking at the size, we're looking at the pickup and drop off location. This data is coming in, and within milliseconds, we're optimizing the shipping mode. So in this case, let's say we've chosen courier because we've already done a calculation, probably ruled out LTL and FTL based on the size of the product and the distance. So maybe we're just looking at internal fleet and courier, or courier and parcel. We choose courier in this particular case. And then from there, as I mentioned, we've already aggregated 12 million drivers, no further capacity required. So the ability to match that order in real time to a courier like DoorDash or Postmates or Freight or GoShare. We have all of these different networks on our platform. We have rates and we execute in real time, and then we track, and that's the customer experience. Being able to receive notifications, photos, signatures, ratings, all in the frame and all branded to the shipper. So our customers, again, like Tractor Supply, like Lowe's, like PepsiCo, those are companies that have the ability to preserve their brand, put their brand front and center, not a carrier or a courier, which is the way it's kind of worked for a long time, because this middleware, if you will, this single system of truth didn't exist. So as we think about the data, that process that I just went through, unbelievable amounts of data are captured in that process. I went back and I looked at how much data our platform generated in Q1, and it was 3.7 billion API calls. That's about 500 API calls per delivery. And what these data calls are doing, they're replacing phone calls, they're replacing Excel sheets, email, intuition, and manual data entry. So you might be thinking, like, what are some of these data calls? So I listed a few of them here. Shipper to OneRail, OneRail to courier, OneRail to consumer, consumer to shipper. It depends on the use case. It varies, but it can be very robust. So the data is immense. And the question that I posed on LinkedIn, which was kind of fun, where was the data and how did it move before that? And I think the answers are right there. Phone calls, Excel, email. There was no data. And if there was data, it was trapped in many different places. So I find this fascinating. What really allows us to do what we do is our use of AI. And that's something that, again, we've been doing since day one of the platform. What we're doing, is we're learning in a zip code for an SLA at a time of day for a certain type of product, what is the best courier network to go with? What's the best one to auto dispatch to? By continuously learning, continuously improving, we're getting a 71-to-1 headcount leverage. And that's that whole example of, we're using 35 to 40 people to manage what would have taken 2,500 people without AI. And that to me is an exciting use of AI. There's a lot of FOMO out there right now. There's a lot of excitement. I'm old enough to remember the dot-com frenzy of the 90s, and it was exciting. It was really exciting. There was a lot of excitement. There was also a little bit of fear. It's not much different than what we're feeling with AI right now. And there was a crazy amount of business models that came out of that. All these different dot-coms, including Amazon, came out of that market. But most of those businesses didn't understand how to actually make money. And what's exciting is we've been doing it for a few years. Our unit economics keep improving our customers' unit economics. So the leverage that we're getting out of AI is continuously reducing the cost to execute deliveries. And that's something that's very exciting. So when we think about the value unlock of doing all this, of focusing on last mile as an entry point to your transformation, if it's a unified commerce transformation, there's still more steps to go. But this is a starting point. And what we've seen is up to about a 70% OpEx savings. And that's from the reduction of phone calls, the reduction of emails, the Wizmo calls that go to the store or the warehouse, the manual processes of entering deliveries in a user interface, or getting on the phone and saying, hey, we don't have any trucks today, or the truck didn't come, to pick up the delivery off the dock. We work with American Tire distributors. We're distributing tires, thousands of tires every single day, and they rely on that dependability and doing it in such a way that it doesn't tax their staff. So the OpEx savings is absolutely unbelievable. We see about a 20% savings on transportation. That's because of efficient matching. The efficient matching that's happening here is think of it as downsizing the fleet asset that you need. And so we came into this market, as a startup a few years ago, and we saw, 5-pound boxes of nails being put on box trucks. We saw them being put in Sprinter vans. That needs to be in a Prius, and that needs to be about an $8 delivery. So we are saving our customers on transportation. We're doing e-commerce rate shopping for companies like Tractor Supply, comparing UPS and FedEx rates and downsizing the SLA. So that's how we save on transportation. Top line sales expansion. We come into a customer's ecosystem and maybe they have 90,000 SKUs, but they've only previously been able to deliver 10,000 of those SKUs because they couldn't rationalize the economics, maybe of smaller, lower cost items, or the opposite. They're working with one delivery provider that can only do up to 50 pounds, which is what we see with a lot of the gig economy providers. That's why you need depth of capacity that have sprinter vans and box trucks. Very important if you're going to be successful in delivering your whole product catalog, which is what every retailer wants to do, because guess what? Every shopper wants to be able to buy everything online that they can get in store, period. That is a fact. That's why Amazon has done so well in this game, is they refactored and built their own supply chain. And then if we think about the next thing, it's margin expansion. If you can save cost and expand sales, you have margin expansion. And we see about a 5% margin expansion. And one thing I missed here, if we go back up to the top on OpEx savings, OneRail has this exception management team. We're managing things like missing items, late deliveries, weather problems, weather impact, could be road conditions, all these things that make deliveries late. And what that's doing is it's taking the burden off the store or the warehouse. We're intercepting those calls. We're providing kind of tier one support on behalf of our customers. We're the ones that are triangulating communication between a courier and potentially a warehouse, or a courier and a consumer. So that human touch is really, really instrumental in delighting the customer. So this is the value unlock, and we're obsessed with this. When we engage, and if you're a shipper and want to understand more about these value levers, OneRail goes through a complete value assessment. We'll show you with your data how these levers can be pulled. We'll take your pain points and we'll translate that into value levers, and then we'll translate that into an ROI. And that's our solution engineering team that does that. And that's really our starting point. If we can't save you anything, there's no sense working together. But if we can, we would love to. So that's the value unlock. And as we wrap up, it's really, just really recanting here. Service and selection is top of mind. What worked yesterday won't work today or tomorrow. I say that all the time at OneRail. We've seen about 9,000% growth. So obviously our team changes, what we do changes, how we do what we do, processes change. And as we're changing, the economy changes, customer preferences change, corporate objectives change. So what worked yesterday won't work today or tomorrow. And that's really the theme of last mile transformation. Unified commerce is incredibly complex. It is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's nobody out there that can just come in and flip a switch and all your legacy systems can talk all of a sudden. That's not how it works. There's no switch that gives you, for the most part, infinite capacity. But there's ways to get started, that can really accelerate time to value. Interdependencies, and that's something I didn't talk about. That's really the root of most complexities, is systems that are dependent upon systems. So even if you get them to talk, sometimes that's not good enough. Interdependencies between an OMS and a transportation or delivery management system can be a real problem. And then finally, last mile optimization is the point of leverage. And there was one more point. The value unlock is highly measurable. So I'm going to stop there. We're excited to answer some questions, and Ron's going to lead that process as we go to the group here.
Thank you so much, Bill. Boy, we've come a long way since the Milkman. Yeah. Fascinating stuff. So audience, we have a Q&A tab at the bottom where you can anonymously post questions should you want to. We've had questions come in through multiple sources. So I'm going to take some questions here in no particular order, and then Bill and I will tag team those and provide responses. So Bill, maybe the first question for you from the list here: what is the quickest way for me to get value out of the OneRail solution?
So we've had customers running within a week. We've done that for what we call proof of value, which is where we can come in. We have a way to be able to execute because our network's already built. Remember, we've already procured the transportation providers. So we have over 1,000 delivery companies, from Priuses to box trucks with lift gates, white glove, debris removal. All these complexities are accounted for. So we can stand a customer up with a user interface to test it, just to get some data points. And we also, typically within a one to two sprints. So a 2-week to 30-day window, we can have a customer integrated with our API, because all you need is one API to be able to hit all that capacity to make all the decisions in real time on your deliveries. So time to value, Ron, on the short end can be 1 to 2 weeks, and on the longer end, just over a month. We also find that we have customers that don't have IT resources, and that's not uncommon in corporate America. So we've actually built custom gateways for our customers. We've done that more than once to get them stood up. We're willing to make that investment. So I consider our solution very friendly to the shipper. I think of it as shipper centric, and that's not just putting their brand on the customer experience. It's how we will augment their IT staff to make it easy to get up and running.
Great answer. Great answer. That kind of leads into the next question, Bill, that was posted, and maybe I'll take the first stab at this one, and then you can add color on it. But the question is, what is the technical lift to implement OneRail? Here's the beauty of this solution. We coexist with any of your backend systems. So you have an OMS, to send us orders. We can easily integrate in a multitude of ways with that system. If we're doing something more advanced beyond last mile and moving into unified commerce and omnichannel, we can connect to just about any system you have that exists today. So the message there is very light touch there, right? We do the integration so we can map to your APIs or connection points, and it makes it really easy to turn the solution on and get value. So the technical lift is very simple. And it's, let's face it, in today's world, a lot of companies, tech resources are facing challenges, right? Lots of projects in a company. So being able to turn on innovation and last mile delivery with OneRail can be pretty straightforward. Bill, any color you want to add to that?
Beautifully said, Ron. No, there's not. I mean, you said it all, and time to value is everything. And I think that really addresses that.
Great. Next question, and I think we just answered this. Will OneRail work with my existing TMS and OMS? And the answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah, it's simple, because we just sit next to the TMS. We're not trying to replace it. Now, we have had customers that didn't even have a TMS, and they think of our solution as like a TMS light, but we sit next to some of the biggest TMSs out there, like Manhattan. And what we do is we get the order from the TMS, we process it, we match it, we execute the customer experience, and then we pass that data back to the TMS, because that's the system of record.
Awesome. Awesome. Next question. What happens if a selected carrier isn't available? So when you think about how OneRail orchestrates delivery in this lightning fast way, where we can do deliveries within 30, 60, 90 minutes, there's a lot of technical orchestration that happens in our system. And so when you post the order to us with the delivery information, we immediately do a smart match of that asset to available vehicles and delivery options in a given market. And when we configure that, there's an SLA that's in place between us, meaning us being OneRail and you, the shipper, you, the retailer, or the origin point for the delivery. And we have a concept called revoke logic. And revoke logic posts a load to an available driver. And if we don't get an acceptance within the SLA timeframe, we immediately go to the next available, post again, and then we go until we have the right match. That's really how that works. Any color on that, Bill?
No, I think you said it well. I will add one more thing. I bring it back to our exception management team. They're great. And if we run into a situation where the revoke logic has run a couple times and there's no more couriers to dispatch it to, they'll actually start calling fleet operations at our courier partners, and they'll assign a truck. So we guarantee delivery. I don't know another company that guarantees a delivery. There's no notion of product being just left on the dock because we didn't have a truck. We try to go upwards of 30 couriers deep in a market. And our theory and our philosophy is any one of those couriers, there's going to be a handful of them that always have capacity. It's not going to be the same ones, but out of 30, between 5 and 6 will have capacity at all times.
Awesome. So this next question, Bill, I love, and I think it gets at the heart of the differentiation with OneRail. The question is OneRail a software-only solution?
That's a great question. So no, it's not. And that's really what differentiates OneRail. There's some other orchestration platforms out there. There's a company called Bring. I would encourage you to go look at them. There's FarEye. I mean, these are our competitors, but we feel really confident that what we're doing is very different because we act as the carrier. So for our shippers who don't have the budget to go hire 5 to 10 people to go sign up, hundreds of couriers and manage them and pay them and manage the performance of those couriers, we've done all that work. So think of it as outsourced courier carrier management. That's a service nobody else is providing, coupled with an orchestration solution. And then our exception management team. It's those 35 to 40 people. It fluctuates a little bit based on volume and time of year. But those are the folks, they're heroes. They're delivery heroes. They're the ones that are triaging the deliveries that have problems. And when you put those 3 components together, you have magic. You have a fully outsourced solution where you don't have to incur more costs that also takes cost out of your current solution because of the automation that we provide.
Yeah, I think that's a great response. And the way I like to explain it to customers is we have decisioning that happenings on our software, but we execute, right? So that marriage of decisioning, smart decisioning, and flawless execution really is what sets OneRail apart in the market. And I always call it a category of one solution, right? Because I really feel that we do that. Next question. How do I know my customer's experience is up to my company standards if I'm not controlling the delivery?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we do during discovery is our customer success team works very collaboratively to define what I call an exceptions framework. So we trace and map all the different permutations of scenarios that could happen. It starts with that. So when our team answers the phone, they're answering the phone as the shipper. Thank you for calling, or we're calling on behalf of American Tire Distributors, Advance Auto Parts. So that's the first part of it. We agree mutually on how to triage and what that logic process will be. Then we operationalize it with our team. Those are 2 really, very important components. And then the third thing is branding. I remember when we started this business, I ordered an iPhone and it came to me and it said DoorDash on it. And I thought, this doesn't look like something I could eat. And it was kind of weird, right, to see DoorDash. And I bought it from Apple. And I understood, obviously, being in the space, but why didn't I get a link that opened up to an Apple experience, because they care so much about their brand? And why didn't I see that? And why didn't the label say, not have the carrier name? It doesn't need to have the carrier name. So I'm a big believer in white labeling, and I believe that's a very shipper-centric approach. And then the final thing, the fourth thing in that customer experience, that the consumer can see the tracking and they can see ETAs, and if there's traffic or weather, it's adjusting the ETAs. But finally, at the very end, we allow our customers to execute a net promoter score or five-star scoring process. So we're getting constant feedback on every delivery, not just, we can see the data. We know if it was on time or not. We know all the data on the delivery, but it's great to get the qualitative data that only the consumer can provide, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. The only thing that you can talk about data all you want. If that customer's not happy, you're not going to win.
Great answer. Next question. How does OneRail get the same data from all those couriers? Maybe I'll take a swing at this one.
Yeah, you know this one better than anybody.
Yeah, the short answer is we don't get the same data from all the couriers. If you look at our network, it's over 12 million assets and growing across thousands of couriers. So when you think about that, that's a very fragmented market. What we've done, and this is one of the key value propositions of OneRail, is we've normalized all that communication coming back from couriers so that we can intelligently understand it, intelligently make decisions, intelligently alert. That's the true beauty of OneRail, is that massive normalization effort. So as a shipper or retailer, you say, well, so what? Well, the so what is you're buffered from all the complexity of understanding those disparate, discrete messages, and you're out of that kind of Tower of Babel concept. OneRail's deciphering all these messages, making them intelligent, and giving you insight into your business. So that's a key value proposition from our team, and our customers love that about us. Okay, next question. Bill, maybe you can answer this one. My business is highly regulated.
Yeah.
What does OneRail do, if anything, for compliancy standards?
Yeah, so go back to the fact that we're kind of an outsourced capacity management solution on top of the software. So we have a team of 10. That's all they're doing, are sourcing couriers to be able to meet the needs of our demand. And so let's take a use case. Let's take an actual example of regulatory. Could be alcohol delivery, could be HIPAA compliance, but let's go with alcohol delivery. OneRail isn't doing the physical delivery, right? We have partners that do those deliveries. We're making it super simple for our shippers to connect to those partners. So when we go out and sign up a courier to join the OneRail network, we do something I call blueprinting. So we will ask the courier, to check the boxes on their capabilities. And so they might check TSA certified. They might check lift gate enabled. They might check age gated products. So that would allow us to sell, to deliver products that require age verification. And then what happens when that order, if we go back to the order flow, that order comes in from that customer, there's only certain couriers that are allowed to do those deliveries in the platform. They're indexed based on, and they're related and matched based on those capabilities. So if it's a regulated product, it's going to look at that particular zip code or geo, and it's going to say, okay, there might be 30 couriers, but there's only 5 that are eligible for the age-gated product. So we do that across several different regulated categories. That's something that, again, just remove the complexities, make it a data-driven decision, and just have the capacity on hand. Refrigerated and frozen has some regulatory constraints, food safe, et cetera, temperature controlled, the same thing. It's a complexity that's easily handled with the right solution.
Awesome. Next question. How does the OneRail network handle oversized items that are heavier than 50 pounds with a size greater than 150 inches?
So it starts with the order data. So our customers are sending us the order data, and part of our intellectual property in the platform is we're looking at mins and maxes on items. So if we see a 2x4, that 2x4 might only be 4 cubic feet in total volume, but it has a max of 10 feet. It has a 10-foot measurement. So it's going to cube out or dimension out of a sedan. So what that does is it just wipes out all the food delivery companies, the rideshare companies, the grocery delivery companies can't do that. Then it starts to look up to the next fleet class, and it says, you know what, we need a Sprinter van. And so we're going to match that to somebody like Freight or GoShare or Bungie. That's how it works. I mean, it's really that simple. Order data comes in, and what we do, our David Dashler was our first CTO. Now he's the head of AI and data analytics. David did a lot in military software as well as gaming, and a lot of it was 3D enabled images. If you think about video games, And so the ability to take that 2x4 and rotate it 360 degrees, that's what we're doing at a SKU level. We know the opening sizes, so when it comes to the weight, 50 pounds, I think was the example. It's the same logic. If it comes in, 50 pounds and 1 ounce, it's going to eliminate all the rideshare companies. It's going to eliminate the food delivery companies because they only do 50 pounds or less. So then it's going to look up to a big and bulky provider. And we've done deliveries on flatbeds. The platform is mode agnostic. So we've used 53-foot flatbeds to deliver equipment, 20,000 pounds of flooring for Lowe's. The platform is very intelligent that way. And the last thing I'll say on this, and this is really important, is we have almost like a credit score that we assign to a particular courier in a particular zip code. We have a ranking. So let's say, that example of we have 30 couriers, but only 5 can really do a gun safe, because that's a really crazy item to deliver. We have a scoring method that says this is the #1 provider to minimize losses, to maximize dependability, and to get this item delivered within the cost constraints that we've agreed on with our shipper customer. So that credit score is ranking and re-ranking based on every delivery. That's part of the AI and self-learning of the platform.
Great. Next question. Can you speak to the verticals that your delivery service providers exist in? Specifically, do you have DSPs in the grocery delivery market or space?
Yeah, we do. We're just getting into refrigerated and frozen now. We're super excited about that. And it's, again, take that team of 10 that are your outsourced courier team. We know the cities we're launching in, and this is a new vertical for us. So what we're doing is we're procuring capacity in those markets because we know within 2 months we have to launch those markets. The delivery capacity, it exists in a few different verticals. There's the rideshare folks, and the food delivery, and a lot of those are, we sort of account for those as a passenger vehicle. We don't think about that as anything big and bulky because they can't deliver over 50 pounds. Then we think at the next level up, it's delivery service providers that could be more of a W-2 professional courier that have 2,000 Sprinter vans, or it could be a gig economy big and bulky company, again, like GoShare. So what we're doing is we're building these verticals of delivery companies that then match back up to the customers we have that are shipping things. So let's just say we've never done white glove before, which we have, but let's say we haven't. We do that today for AFES, which is the Army Air Force Exchange. But let's just say we never did it. Our team will go out and find those assets. And that's the agreement we have with our shippers. We're very transparent. We have a heat map. That heat map shows the coverage of our network, and you have the ability to toggle different capabilities on and off. So if we touch white glove, that heat map is going to look a certain way. And if there's a market that they want to launch in and we haven't secured assets there, we laser focus on that market until we have, again, at least 5-6 different companies that can do the deliveries.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I would say too, in grocery kind of consumer, that space, we do a lot of work around rescue deliveries, save the day kind of concepts, right? Where we all know big grocers have concepts like OTIF, right? On time and in full. Well, if I need to release a truck from a cross dock and in hotshot another delivery to make the on time aspect, OneRail is a great solution for that concept as well, right? So we've seen lots of use cases there.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ron. And just to further, I think I didn't do a great job answering that question around grocery and food. We work with companies like Skipcart, companies like Point Pickup. They've done a phenomenal job in the grocery space. We also have some of the food delivery companies, notably that are not DoorDash, that are doing some of those deliveries. So we have a great mix, and if we don't have it, we get it.
Awesome. So I know we're coming up on time. I'm going to get one more question in here, Bill. How important is it for 3PLs to move to automated dimensioning from the manual?
It's very important. And that move from manual to automated, first of all, we have customers that don't have a real clean dim and weight file. They don't have all the dimensions. And so we've built logic to do kind of a general sizing. And so we've done that before with product catalogs as deep as 100,000 SKUs. And it's worked really well, not perfect. There are some exceptions that come out of it. The ideal solution is to have kind of full automation with a mature dims and weights file, but not everybody's there. So we've found some workarounds to that. And that's a general sizing logic based on the item. And it has to do with text lookup, and, there's some indexing that has to happen. But it's something that we do. And we even have, let's just say there's no dims and weights, nothing, that would be more of a manual solution in terms of triggering the selection of the vehicle size. So even if you have no dimension data whatsoever, we can give you a portal where the order comes in automatically. The associate in the store or warehouse just has to select which size vehicle. That's it. That's the only thing they have to do. All the address data, the product data, customer data, all that data is in the platform. All they have to do is select which vehicle size: sedan, sprinter van, box truck.
That's awesome. Bill, I know we're at time here, and there are a few more questions for the audience. We will certainly get answers to those questions for you. Bill, I want to thank you so much for your time. What a great presentation today. Very thought-provoking. Anybody listening today or watching, if you have any questions whatsoever on OneRail, our solution, our capability, how we might be able to work with you, I would urge you to personally reach out to me. My email address is ron.richardson@onerail.io, not .com, .io, and I will respond immediately. Thank you so much, everybody, and I hope everybody has a great day. Last thing, if you're interested in the Gartner Last Mile Delivery Market Guide, please scan the code on the screen here. And then obviously, if you'd like to connect with Bill, he's got his, that's fancy, Bill. I like that, right? Bill's got his code there as well, so you can certainly scan that. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you all.